Godzilla vs. Biollante has a massive cast of characters, from Dr. Shiragami to Miki and Gondo to Kirishima. This film has no lack of characters, but I believe it is to the film's benefit. The movie deals with the aftermath of a Godzilla attack, not only the destruction, but the scientific opportunity that is opened up by the appearance of this monster. In this movie, there are two different organizations trying to retrieve Godzilla's cells from Japan, and then each character has a different reason for why they are fighting Godzilla. There's a lot to keep track of when watching this movie. However, that is the point. This film isn't an intense character study like Minus One, but a grand overview of society. Neither way of storytelling is better than the other. What I am saying is that they can be used effectively depending on what the messages being pushed are. In Biollante, most characters start off the film similar to how they end the film. They have already made their convictions by the start. Kirishima is against exploiting and overusing Godzilla cells. Shiragami only wants his daughter back, and Kuroki wants to stop Godzilla and save Greater Japan. There are some realizations made, but the true conflict isn't in the characters changing, but more in how the characters attempt to hold on to their convictions as the world around them becomes increasingly against them. Not to mention, they all have quirks to make them distinctive. I love how Gondo is so bored that he seems almost okay with Godzilla returning so he won't lose his job and can actually do something. He may have fallen in this movie, but we will see more about him down the road. With all these characters and their different perspectives, we can see the clash of ideologies unfold at wide scales. In this movie, I'd say Kirishima is technically the main character, if we have to find one. But the character that truly exemplifies this movie better than anyone else is Dr. Shiragami. He might be my personal second favorite tortured scientist of this franchise. Dr. Serizawa, of course, always being at the top. But it is true that since the beginning, Godzilla has always dealt with scientific expansion, and how what we discover isn't always used for good, but can be used for malicious purposes. Dr. Shiragami is a continuation of Serizawa in that sense, but his reasons for pushing the barrier of science lie in tragedy. Dr. Shiragami was working in the country of Saradia to help the country get off its dependence on oil. Now, I didn't know why they just invented another country in the Middle East in this movie, probably to avoid drawing connections with any actual country, but it's already too late for that. However, this isn't new for the franchise. Fictional countries were invented for Mothra and Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, just to name a few off the top of my head. Anyway, in an attack by an American bioengineering organization, Dr. Shiragami's daughter, Erika, is killed. I have to say, the actor did an amazing job in portraying Dr. Shiragami. When he hears the building that his daughter was in has been blown up, his reaction and run towards it was so convincing. For the rest of the film, you can really feel how much this event has haunted him just by looking at his face. Anyway, Shiragami takes the cells from his daughter and combines them with a rose, her favorite flower. This is his way of making sure she continues to live. When he is confronted and asked to help create a new nuclear bacteria that will stop Godzilla, he refuses. He no longer cares about doing anything for the rest of the world. He only wants to stay by himself and keep the roses alive. However, tremors created by Godzilla shake his house and damage the roses. As such, the doctor agrees to the plan, only if he is allowed to have access to the cells of Godzilla. In a very atmospheric scene with lightning and thunder, Shiragami mixes Godzilla's cells with the roses, hoping that this will make the roses live forever. Of course, this only creates a monster, and one of the most interesting ones at that. This marks an interesting change in the franchise. When Godzilla started, he was always the bad guy. It wasn't until his fifth film that he switched to being more of a savior for Japan, when he went up against Ghidorah. But the difference was that a new, more evil monster was introduced, and Godzilla transitioned into being a good guy. But in this movie, Biollante is just as tragic a creature of Godzilla. Neither of them are just destroyers, but neither of them are saviors of Japan either. Their fight is something that never should have happened. I love this run of films, as we the audience are asked to feel sorry for Godzilla's enemy, something I don't feel we had been previously expected to do, except maybe terror of Mechagodzilla, but I feel it is more realized here. Biollante is the dilemma. It is science taken too far and perhaps unethical extremes. Did Erika want this? Biollante is a creature that is alive, in pain. Can it ever be right to experiment like that? Nuclear engineering and genetic engineering facing off. We are still creating more problems when we haven't even solved the other ones yet. This film continues to warn us that we are always progressing in science and finding new ways to destroy ourselves, and we must always be vigilant. Our errors are not only in the past, we carry them now. But Shiragami isn't being purposely malicious with his work. He genuinely just wants to undo a tragedy in his life. The main theme of this film, though, is that despite our intentions, everything has unintended consequences. Shiragami ends up creating a creature that is suffering and is put through constant pain. These consequences reverberate around the world and more likely than not make it back to us. Shiragami and other characters defend these actions, saying it is just that this is how science progresses. But that does leave the question open. With how science progresses, is there a limit? Is there a way we should go about things that prevents stuff like this from happening? It is a hard question to answer. And then that's where this film enters the spiritual. Godzilla is no stranger to being spiritual. Even as far back as the first film, we were introduced to a spiritual side of Godzilla on Odo Island. In this film, it is seen through the eyes of a new character, Miki. She is able to connect to people, plants, and monsters on an emotional and psychic level. This film does introduce psychic powers into this timeline, and this plot thread will stick with these films all the way to its end. Anyway, it is Miki who can sense that Erica's soul is trapped within Biollante. This is another thing I like about this film. It starts to connect us emotionally to what is happening, making a more impactful Godzilla film. Not only do we see the consequences of discovery, but we see the emotional impact, which makes it real. Another thing this film shows us is that living in this world is a constant struggle. We are never done living in it unless we die, as seen in one short yet brilliant scene where two older characters talk about Kuroki while he is asleep. One says that it is now up to Kuroki's generation to save the world. The other character turns to him and says it cannot be left to just his generation, as we are still alive and we still bear responsibility for this world. Godzilla is not defeated by the end of this film either. In a scene, which I admit I do find very cool and cathartic, Godzilla emerges from his volcano, ready to terrorize Japan again. Quick tangent, but I love the pacing of this film. It is always right, keeping us at a brisk pace, but letting things unfold naturally. I love that the film starts out with the levels of a Godzilla warning, and then as the film goes on, we progress through each of these warnings until Godzilla's return becomes a full crisis. Not to mention, I love all the psychic kids showing us what they dreamed of, and it's all pictures of Godzilla. What an oddly haunting way to show Godzilla is coming back. Anyway, they manufacture a nuclear bacteria to kill Godzilla. But they did not take into account that Godzilla's temperature is too low for the bacteria to work on him. At the end of this film, Godzilla is weakened, but he is still out there, because, as I always say, Godzilla represents humanity's capacity to destroy itself. And until we no longer risk the entire world with our existence, Godzilla will stay. What will happen next isn't predictable, as seen in another one of my favorite scenes where the military thinks they can outsmart Godzilla, so they build up all their defenses around Tokyo Bay, only for Godzilla to emerge in Osaka. He is the consequence of our actions that have grown to such a point they are no longer in our control. But at the same time, maybe this film still shows some hope for humanity. Dr. Shiragami even renounces his actions in the creation of Biollante at the end of the movie, and when Biollante dies, we see the image of Erica ascended to the clouds, an oddly beautiful way to end the movie, considering everything that transpired. But there was a dream there, to cover deserts with flowers. Even if this initially good idea became warped and ended with a monster, can't we see that humanity must be good at its core? At the end of this movie, you can really feel how tired everyone is, but they continue to move forward. But the issue of Godzilla, of course, looms overhead. But honestly, as long as no time travelers show up, I'm sure he'll probably stay stuck in the ocean because of the bacteria. The world is an ever-developing mess stuck in chaos, but if we pull together, maybe we can save ourselves. But we must always be working towards a better world and maintaining it. One last thing. Can we talk about how amazing the cinematography is in this movie? The use of reflections on glass to see both the monsters and characters' reactions, or using the reflection to show what is on the characters' minds, and the introduction of Mickey and the Roses is a memorable image. Can't wait to see her in the next 5 movies. And the special effects were all on point. Yeah, it's the 80s, and at the end of the day, it is a guy in a suit. But once you get past that, it is all there. And the colors and framing were also eye-catching and intriguing. And the soundtrack was absolutely amazing, and I'm glad they utilized the original themes. This movie would bring Ifukube back, the original Godzilla composer, but more on that in the next video. They all did a splendid job and deserve to be praised for that. Anyway, that's all I got for today's video, and as always, thanks for watching.